Hi guys, welcome to our Tech Beach community. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode in the Woman in Tech series, and not just any woman, guys, Wonder Woman in Tech series. I'm so psyched to be here, but you're probably accustomed to that, me being excited at being at all our conversations. And today we are going to be tackling all things around thriving beyond disruption. And we have some amazing stories that we're going to be sharing as a component of that. And I'm going to be joined by three wonderful women who are going to share their stories around how they have thrived beyond disruption and how that disruption has supported them in achieving amazing success in other areas of their life. So first of all, I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping. Make sure that you have your hydration nearby. I have my glass of water, whatever it is for you. You know, you want to chill out. Some of you, it's the end of the work day, so I understand where you might want to be taking it easy. For some of you, like one of our guests is actually in Australia, it's the morning, right? So you may be getting your coffee, whatever it is that makes you feel good, you want to grab it so that you can have it to participate in this discussion. Also reminding you guys that we definitely want to hear from our community. These conversations are for you. And so we want you to drop in questions or comments in the chat. You know, right now, if you've already joined us live, why don't you go ahead and just say where you're hailing from? You know, say hi if you have a guest that's going to be speaking that you're familiar with. I want to big up, of course, and welcome our production team, Genesis Studio, who is always making us look amazing. Thank you so much, Marcus and team, for that. And just to reflect a little bit with you guys on the journey that we've been on so far with our Women in Tech series. You know, we started off with tackling some of the key conversations that we may be challenged with in the space of leadership. And we had some amazing women guests on for that discussion, where we dropped some tips and tricks for how to navigate the boardroom with areas that you may have challenges with. And then following that discussion, we had something that was a little bit different, but really great tools in terms of creating wellness while you're at work, finding your flow state. And we did that with the co-founders from Recess, who were sharing with us all about the technology that helps to support staying in flow and avoiding that stress and overwhelm feeling that so many of us have become familiar with since the pandemic. And then today, we're going to be moving into a conversation about disruption. And that disruption can really come about in various different ways. And the speakers that are going to be joining me today to kind of flesh this out and bring life and color to that discussion are Gail, Karrian, and Stephenie. So Gail Figaro is the organizational psychologist and AVP HSE at PBS Technology Group, lots of acronyms there. And then we have Dr. Karrian Hepburn-Malcolm, who is the VP for Sales and Service at Trinidad and Tobago Unit Trust Corporation. And then last but certainly not least, we have Stephenie Rodriguez, who is the founder and CEO of Jozu for Women, Inc. So I want to welcome my three awesome guests and just kind of do a brief background on what we're going to be talking about today. And then we'll get straight into the juice of the conversation, right? Because I know you guys want to hear the stories. So today we're going to be talking about the different ways that disruption can happen in our lives personally and how these challenges can actually lead us to access the best and highest versions of ourselves in our personal lives and in our careers. We've all had our own experiences of what I like to call a personal pandemic. And I'm actually wearing pink today in observation of one of the ways I had a personal pandemic, and it's also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So as a survivor and as an advocate, I definitely wanted to show up in my pink. And of course, while I may have had one personal pandemic in the health space, which is one of the areas that it could occur in, those types of challenges, the disruptions in your life, the traumas in your life can happen in myriads of areas, can happen in your physical space, can happen in your financial space, your mental space, or even emotional space. Lots of different types of trauma can occur, and it could even be all of the above, because for some of us, it is all of the above, right? So today we're going to be hearing about 3 particular stories from these amazing women who may have had all of the above kinds of experiences and challenges, but we're going to hone in on one key area that is very clear that they overcame significant disruption and created magic out of it. So we're going to be touching on financial, physical, and emotional disruptions. And these ladies are going to help us to understand how they were able to persevere and thrive beyond that. So welcome, ladies. I'll just say a quick welcome to say hi to our audience before I break us out into little groups. Awesome. I see us on our unmuted. All right, so we're going to start off first with financial. And this is a space that actually I think is one of the areas that many persons really are seeking to get some insight on how to thrive beyond. And Karrian is going to be joining the conversation to tell us a little bit about the financial challenges that she experienced. So Karrian, on your journey towards being a VP, I mean, you have like major title, right? You are responsible for Dr. Karrian, you've achieved quite a bit, you're responsible for quite a bit. And so I'm curious as to, how did you transition from such financial struggles into what we seem as somebody that is blooming and blossoming, not just beautiful on the outside, but on the inside, and then thriving in your career?
Well, thank you, Stacey. I need to talk to you every day. You make me really feel good about myself. And hello to our viewers. Of course, I have to, big up my Jamaica crew. I hail from Jamaica, but I live in Trinidad and Tobago. And what I'd start off by saying, Stacey and everyone else that's watching, is that I realize financial struggles, it is partially something that we experience in a very tangible way, but it's also very mental and psychological. I say that because, as I started from, I would say, ground zero to where I am now, I realized that I could still be in a constant state of financial struggle if I didn't learn how to manage my finances or manage my cash flow or just manage my lifestyle. So that's the first thing I want to put out there. But obviously some people have it much harder than others. So personally, I started from extremely humble beginnings. Grew up in Jamaica, grew up in a community that it was below middle class, I would say. And my father was a tailor. My mom became a seamstress to help my father in the business. My father would boast about being illiterate because he did not attend school at all. And my mother, while she went to school, she did not have the opportunity to sit her exams and complete high school in the true sense of it. So more or less unqualified. And so for the very early stages of my life, my needs were provided for, let me say that. But at about age 10, when my parents separated, things became extremely difficult. I would say I definitely fell below the poverty line at that stage, because my father was the main breadwinner. And with my mother no longer working with my father, and with my mother being unqualified, it was very difficult to secure work. So we lived with many family members, and that was difficult. As you can imagine, the adjustment in living with anybody for that matter, moreover, living with different people at different phases, because, people have their different preferences, their different pet peeves. And I was always conscious of the fact that I am in somebody's space, they're doing me a favor, and I'm a financial burden because my mother is not working. She can't contribute to the bills, and neither could I, because I was in prep school at the time, and then eventually to high school. So things changed drastically. So I remember, obviously having to sleep with my mother and share a room, sometimes not just with my mother, with other relatives, depending on what was happening in their lives. And when I say sleep together, I remember for a long while, we slept on, a sponge bed or a foam bed. And I just remember the hopelessness that she felt. I remember hearing her sob at nights, and I being, as I said, unable to contribute to her financial status. It was really, very heavy psychologically. When we eventually moved out of our different relatives' homes, so I lived with two different aunts, an uncle. I hope I'm not leaving out anybody at the risk of offending them, because they would have helped me. But as I said, my mother's family really came to our rescue. So my mother got a job, and we moved into our own place. But again, what should I say? It was shelter, bare necessity. And to call it a studio would make it sound fancy. It was a one room, and it was literally a box, and everything was in close proximity. So I would joke and say that I could lie on my bed and close the bathroom door, open the fridge, turn on the TV with my toe. So family contributed, some of the furniture. We bought some on hire purchase, and how it was. So very, very, very disparate situation. There were days when, I have to say, she ensured that I never went a day or a night hungry. When I opened my cupboard, I was sure to see at least a tin of corned beef, a tin of mackerel, some flour, and some rice. In Jamaica, or maybe the Caribbean, we call it corned beef, bully beef, right? So I never went hungry, and I could say thank God for that. I never experienced that. But all the other uncertainties that went with not having it, was a strain. Even going to school, just wondering if you'd have enough lunch money, and I went to a very prestigious high school. So I had passed for a school that, a lot of affluent children went to. And it became more apparent to me that they were, what seemed like rich to me, and I was poor. The stark difference became apparent. I recall, studying even when I got to UA, and because I told you the dining table was literally, like, the bed would be literally behind us. My poor mom having to sleep with that bright light on, while I studied and so on. And so I slept in the same bed, in the same room with my mom from I was like age 10 to maybe age 22 when I finished UA and I got a job. My university education, thank God to the government of Jamaica, was paid for by a student loan. A great part of it in grant because of how bad our situation was, and the other part in a loan, which I would start repaying once I got a job. And I fast forward. I really hated school, but my parents insisted that I get an education to avoid them being in the situation that they were in. I wanted to drop out several times and just get a job that could help pay the bills, but they encouraged me to stay in school. After graduating from university, I got a job at a local bank, during Bunting and Golding. And as I said, life really changed at that point for us. So I went from, as I said, really disparate situation to suddenly I was employed. I could pay rent in a decent neighborhood. We could afford certain luxuries. As a matter of fact, at age 25, I became head of private banking at Bunting and Golding. So I went from being, as I said, poor to at 25 earning the equivalent of 100,000 US. So imagine what a stark contrast that was for me. And that's why I kind of touched in the beginning about money management, because when you suddenly come into money and you're not used to money, you do all kind of crazy things. And that's for another day, another story, but as I said, you can now suddenly be earning and still be poor if you're not managing your finances well. You could still find that somehow you're living hand to mouth. But anyway, thank God I ended up in financial services, and that in and of itself was a training ground for me and helped me to, mature financially. So last but not least, I would say that because I had, gotten such a good opportunity, um, I mean, I could definitely say that God's hand must have been on my life because as you know, I'm not from a family with name. I, while I was in prep school, I would consider myself bright, but by university, I was really struggling. I was flunking out, and I barely made it through university. So it's not like I had a honors resume, to show. And but for some reason, my bosses always saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and they really pushed my career. They really pushed me along, and I got some amazing opportunities from then until now, from a very early age, which allowed me to buy a home at age 26. And that was my mother's only dream. She would always say, boy, I want to own a house before I die, if it's even an NHT house. So that's National Housing Trust, which is government subsidized housing. She always said that, and I was so happy that I was able to purchase a home that we could call our own. We had our own room, our own bed, our own bathroom. But the unfortunate part of all of that is that my mom died within 3 months of me purchasing that home. So that was really heartbreaking for me. And that's something that I still grapple with, that after we had gone through so much, after she poured so much in me, that I feel like she didn't get to enjoy the fruits of her work and everything she had done. As soon as I could do things for her, she passed away. So that's something that I still struggle with. And that's something that, I still try to come to terms with. So that's a synopsis of, I would say, my story from, obviously a period of very hard times to coming into a career that, was very fulfilling, financially and otherwise.
Wow. Wow. Well, amazing, amazing, Karrian. And I do understand quite a few of the different things that you mentioned. And what I would say to that is, lots of us in not just the Caribbean, but I think globally, experience at different points in our times, not in our lives, not just financial challenges, but to have to endure it for such a long period. And I think also that your mom clearly, like you said, your bosses did, saw something in you that maybe you weren't seeing in yourself, right? And was just looking forward to being able to see that come to fruition, which is what she saw when you guys were able to finally purchase your home. I can't wait to bring you back on to talk with the group. Thank you so much for sharing that. Amazing. Now, we are going to move into what I have coined as physical. And I'm actually so happy that Karrian kind of positioned the conversation around, well, you're having financial. Financial is the focus, but really there is a mental and psychological component to it, because even though we're going to be talking about physical, meaning your physical well-being, your health as an area of challenge, with Stephenie, this also affects you, emotionally, mentally, and psychologically. So I want to welcome Stephenie Rodriguez now to tell our story. She's what I would consider a serial entrepreneur and a tech CEO, so true woman in tech. And I remember one of the reasons why I was so impacted by Stephenie's stories, because I actually remember her doing a soft launch of one of the products, the Wonder Safe product, at the last tech beach that we were able to have in person on the beach. I remember I signed up as one of the beta testers, and she was wearing a white dress, and we were all out there by the bonfire. We did Just Full with Belly. It was a nice evening over at Iberia Star, and it was just so wonderful. And Steffi was about to get off on this amazing launch journey that was going to revolutionize safety for women travelers in particular. And And her life took a very tragic and interesting turn that has somehow created even more amazing opportunities than she thought. So Steph, welcome. And I want to have you share your story of launching Africa and where you went from a world where your job was to save the world and it shifted into you saving yourself.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Volume's good. Terrific. Thank you. And Karrian, I love your story so much and your energy. I just want to give you the biggest hug because you just inspire me so much. So I just want to say, you're moving me all the way from Trinidad here in Sydney. But yes, I am a girl from the Caribbean. My family come from Puerto Rico, and I'm very pleased to say I spent some time building my startup in Jamaica. So I feel that you all are my family. I had been working on a concept called Jozu for Women with two Jamaican co-founders at the beginning of 2017. And our mission was, as we saw it, to disrupt and improve personal safety because we found there was such a need for it, not just in Jamaica, but everywhere else. And we attended the Women's Startup Lab in 2017 in the Silicon Valley, and were advised that we needed to productize ourselves and to come up with some means for which our product and our business and our ideas could gain traction faster. This was quite a mandate. And so in 2018, we went into a great period of R&D, and I met with a retired CIA safety expert, and he told me what was required to create safety solutions. So I drew it on a piece of hotel stationery. I found a CAD designer, and we then would build a physical piece of hardware that matched with the smartphone app. And that was the beginning of Wander Safe. And what we came to Tech Beach to share in 2018 was Wander Safe. In 2019, to see that we could, in fact, deliver on our mission to impact 1 billion lives by 2025. I was invited to go to Africa and to Nigeria to open markets and speak at conferences about collaborating for the 17th UN SDG and teach young people about collaboration for the goals. So I went along to Lagos, Nigeria. I spoke at 2 conferences, went on to India, and 2 weeks later, I was in the Boston airport flying back to Australia after this big road show. And I was in the Delta Lounge with my best friend, and I had a seizure, and I went into a coma, and I didn't wind up making my flight. And what I didn't know at the time was that I had been bitten by a mosquito in Nigeria that given me the world's deadliest parasite. And in a very short space of time, in fact, 2 weeks from the actual date of being bitten to where I was in a coma on my deathbed with very low prediction rates that I would recover. In fact, my attending doctors gave me an 80% survival rate, like fatality rate. They said, no, we don't think she's going to make it. And 3 different times in this 2-week coma, doctors told my family I had less than 10 minutes of my life. So going from being full, able-bodied superwoman, startup founder, flying around the world, doing everything, to being unable to do anything was how I woke up in October of 2019. And where we were as a business, we were just about to raise our seed round. We had just launched our software as a service offering. We had scaled up, we'd secured B2B customers, like everything in playbook that you would do to grow and take your business forward. But nobody could foresee, Stacey, what would happen next with our demise, basically, or my demise, and what would then come after. So waking up from this coma was by and large a miracle, considering that only 2% of those infected with this parasite, cerebral malaria, actually live. So coming through that was amazing, but the damage that it left my body was something that I wouldn't just wake up and jump out of bed and get back at the office the next day. In fact, it was quite the opposite, waking up completely vulnerable, Brene Brown style, with not even being able to brush my own teeth or stand up or take myself to the toilet, like completely flat on my back. And that was a very interesting time to see everything that we had hoped and dreamed or purposed to stop. I didn't know when I woke up, nor could the doctors tell me that my journey would take me more than 330 nights in hospital and 33 operations and enormous trauma and pain before I'd ever get to think about my business and my startup and the people I wanted to help. I really had to come to terms with helping myself, and a huge lesson in self-love for me, because I had often put the needs of everybody else before my own. And, in March of this year, after such a journey, we became Australia's first bilateral osseo-integrated amputee, meaning I lost both of my feet above my ankles, so I am bionic. But in that trade-off, I'm now walking and standing and dancing and back at the fore of my mission, but after a 2-year hiatus and distraction. But one of the most amazing things that came from this is while I was on my very personal journey and finding my new normal, the rest of the world was dealing with COVID and the pandemic and locking down and changing the way they showed up for their jobs and for their needs and things being done. And that pandemic has actually changed our business. And in looking at the shadow pandemic, the World Health Organization is speaking of, which is domestic violence. We very much were designed to help and empower solo travelers and remote workers before with our technology, our free app WanderSafe, and our hardware. But now that the pandemic has gone through and it's been 2 years, we're able to really empower those coming out from the shadow pandemic of domestic and increased sexual violence. So it's something beautiful has come from the trauma and the pain. And, us being able to refocus our offering, even now and next week on International Day of the Girl Child, we've partnered with 5 NGOs in Lagos, Nigeria, and Abuja that we're empowering to run impact studies to see if we can reduce the number of violence, sexual violence, and domestic violence women in Nigeria through WanderSafe, maybe 2 years later than we hoped, but certainly delighted that we're able to be present and seeing that adversity has built us a bridge to where we needed to be right here and right now to serving the greater good.
Wow. Well, I no matter how often I've heard the story, and guys, I've read it, I've heard it, I've talked to Stephenie, it just always lands with how we take little things for granted. I mean, here in Jamaica, I can tell you, we're always fussing the mosquitoes about just today I was complaining about mosquitoes, but we don't necessarily take into consideration, the different things that are attached to simple things like mosquito bites can completely change your life, and not just, the things around you, but your body even, and I just want to acknowledge you, Steph, for the bravery, the courage that you have faced going through. You said 39 surgeries it's been so far?
About 35. About
35. 35. You don't add any more to that, sorry. So yes, the 35 surgeries. And I'm looking forward to bringing you back into the group conversation so that we can talk about how continue focusing on how that disruption has impacted your success as a founder and CEO. So thank you so much for being vulnerable enough to share that.
Thank you.
All right. Now, wow. Amazing, right? And I have some great comments that are coming in, and I'm really, really excited about just the way that you guys are responding to this. Please feel free to add any questions that you want to see if we can field before we let go of these amazing women. Now, the third area that we want to focus on, which I think is also something that is being affected or created as a shadow pandemic is just emotional and mental trauma. And as we shift into this conversation, we want to talk with Gail, who has had a series of multiple emotional traumas at varying stages that led her to a journey of self-discovery. So Gail, as you come and talk with us, I would love for you to share the most resonant chain of events that you feel have supported your growth evolution. You know, the things that really were the standout items, the standout things that helped you to evolve into the amazing woman and leader that you are today.
Thank you, Stacey, and good afternoon to everyone who's listening in. I just want to honor my sisters in success, Karrian and Stephenie. Their stories are amazing. I've been given the most interesting category, which is emotional. So I'm going to ask the listeners to send me your light and your positivity to bear me up as I share my story. So here we go. Very much like Karrian, at the age of 8 or so, it occurred to me that we were very poor. I grew up in what would be considered a shack by most, an old wooden house with an outhouse. And unlike Karrian, we did have days of definite hunger and trying to survive. I can say that while that is a financial consideration, it does have an emotional impact because you're always anxious about when is the next meal coming? How is a bill going to be paid? You see the stress being experienced by your parents, and it does resonate. We had that compounded by my stepfather, who is, you know, in truth and in fact, the only father I've known, the person whose name I still carry today. He had a series of 4 heart attacks between the ages of 8 and 16 for me. So every time that happened, there was this, you know, immense worry and concern and sadness among our family members. At the age of 16, when I was a week and a half away from writing my CXC exams, he passed away. And even the grieving process was disrupted because at that point in time in Trinidad, the pathologists at the hospital where he passed away were striking or in, let's just say, locked in negotiations. And because of that, bodies were not being released. So my dad's body remained in the morgue while other prisoners continued dying, and they had to put a baby and 2 grown men on top of him in the freezer compartment. That went on for 7 days. And when we finally got him, even telling him goodbye was difficult because he didn't look like himself. So that was definitely difficult. Now, up to that point in my life, my mom had always been a housewife. And when my stepdad passed away, we had to figure out how to make ends meet. Now, I want to pause to honor my sister, Pamela, because at that point in time, she was a babysitter in the US and she did her best to help us back in Trinidad, but she could only help so much. So I remember being 16 and seeing my mom take jobs, cutting grass at the side of the road, taking opportunities whenever they would come up to clean offices and toilets for persons to make ends meet. And I felt really compelled to do something because it was a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. So my very first job, just before I entered sixth form, for some, that would be equivalent to 11th grade, I would have gotten a job during the July-August holidays at a chicken farm, where my responsibility was to clean out the pens of these, areas where they had like 400 chickens per pen. You had to go in with 12-hour days, 7 days a week for the equivalent of $3.60 US a day. I did that because I wanted to help my mom with my school expenses, and I was able to buy my school shirts, so I felt a sense of accomplishment, but I could also see how heartbreaking that, I had to be put in that position. I always wanted to go to university as a child and as a teen, But I slowly started to realize that my mom could never afford to send me. The option to have free education at the tertiary level was years away in Trinidad. And so when I was asked by my sister and my mom what my plans were after leaving secondary school, I convinced them that I had absolutely no desire to pursue a degree. It was one of the most painful pretenses I have ever had to represent in my entire life. But I understood that there were no other options at that point in time. I eventually got married, and I was blessed with two beautiful little girls. During the various situations over time, it became very clear that that dynamic was not a healthy one or a positive one. So when my daughters were 3.5 years and 4 months respectively, I filed for divorce. I had no plans. I had nowhere to go. So I would have moved from friends' homes to friends' home while I figured out my living situation. But I know I needed to leave for my emotional and mental health. So that would have been in 2010. In 2011, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And over the next 3 years, I would find myself juggling between flying to the USA, where she was based at that point in time with my sister, to be with her during chemotherapy, and then flying back to be with my daughter, who would have experienced 4 separate bouts of pneumonia during the same time that my mom was going through her cancer. I can tell you it's really difficult when, you know, the person who gave birth to you and the person you gave birth to are hospitalized at the same time for very serious illnesses. My mom would have passed away in 2014. Once again, the grieving process for a parent would be disrupted, because while I was attending her funeral in New York, on the day of her funeral, one of my favorite cousins, who's younger than me and had a beautiful 8-month-old baby girl, got into an accident in Trinidad. He would survive for 7 weeks, and he passed away as well. Between those deaths, my daughter had to be taken into surgery for an abdominal hernia that suddenly began to get progressively worse. I ended up coming down with shingles that year, and my doctor said it was possibly triggered by the stress burden I was carrying at that point in time. In 2014, towards the end of it, I made a decision to finally realize one of my dreams and go after my degree. To my surprise, during the application process, something I consider a positive disruption, while applying to write the bachelor's, I was told that I had met the criteria for mature entry into the master's program. So I definitely was grateful to the University of Liverpool for that. I went on to commit myself to doing that. And a few months into that journey, I was at home and I got a call that my brother, who's 15 years older than me and has always been my spiritual guru, he had collapsed at home and he was not responding. So they would have transferred him to 2 different hospitals that day. And when we got to the last hospital, they wouldn't let us in to see him. A few hours later, we were asked by the doctor to come in and say our goodbyes. I remember seeing my nieces and who were his daughters and his wife grab onto him, begging him to stay. And because he was such a pivotal person in my spiritual development, in that moment, I recalled all the conversations that we had about the soul and its journey and its purpose. So I went over to his bed and I played with his beard one last time. And I told him that although I loved him and I wanted to keep him around, that I was going to let him go. And I gave him permission to leave. And I walked to the end of the bed. And I remember looking over my shoulder and I saw him take one last breath and he was gone. I can tell you that having to write 3 eulogies in 1 year and take lead on planning 2 funerals for loved ones is quite a task. That same year that my brother passed away, during a routine test, I was told that some cells of concern were discovered in my body. After some follow-up screenings, I was diagnosed with cancer in situ, which basically means cancer that has not yet moved past its point of origin, and it's still at a very early stage. I had the option of surgery instead of going through chemo or radiography therapy, and unfortunately, the surgery was not managed very well after the fact, and I developed a bleed, losing 4 pints of blood and going into hypovolemic shock. Thankfully, I was well taken care of after that point, and to this day, the cancer has not returned. What I would say is, while all of that was transpiring, there were other disruptions happening in my space, but these were more positive. In the former vision of our company, I had two key mentors, Fenwick Reed and Gail C. For some reason, these gentlemen identified something in me that they wanted to invest in, and they challenged me and called out a strength in me that I didn't even know was there. So with that said, I went from being the HSC properties coordinator for one company to the regional HSC director for our entire organization across 5 countries. Even as I dealt with the issues I just shared here today, between 2014 and 2020, my team was able to win 5 national awards with the American Chamber of Commerce, and we went on to also be successful and recognized in many other forums. I would have completed my master's in organizational and business psychology and even went on to win the Dissertation of the Year award. I became a certified change manager, a trainer, auditor. And during this pandemic period, I can tell you that my team pulled together, despite the several disruptions of us being sold to another group. Our company, changes in leadership, the disruptions of the ash fall and the pandemic, we ended up pulling together despite the disruptions and creating something beautiful. We created something called the Phoenix Protocols because we wanted to echo to patients that even in disruption, when everything feels like it's burning all around you, you can still rise and evolve and succeed. So in a very tight nutshell, that is some of my journey emotionally. So thank you for the platform. And Stacey, I'll hand back over to you.
Wow. Okay. So I'm just happy that you went into the other types of amazing things that were happening, because I had to dry up the responses. And I think just listening to all the stories today and looking at how we have been able to not just survive, but to thrive beyond, because you do have a choice when you're going through these different challenges. And you had a repetition of things, major challenges. I mean, 3 eulogies in a year for persons who are close family members. That's usually one death is trauma, right? And so just being able to thrive beyond that, thriving beyond, just your body changing completely, becoming a bionic person, despite your zest for changing the world and making other women safe, and then Karrian, just being able to surpass expectations of persons who come up in situations, in the financial challenges that you faced, because again, there is always that choice. Do I go to school, or do I just forget about it and go and try to hustle some money, right? So I think, ladies, I would just like to collectively applaud you. We have some, really great comments that will be coming through to share from our viewers. And one of the things that I wanted to do as we kind of brought it home to the group, and you each shared bits and pieces of how you were able to transition into successful situations with either your businesses or your careers. One of the anchoring factors that I find is common amongst all of you is having some type of support, whether it's a support individual or a support system. Gail just mentioned her mentors. Stephenie, did you have an individual or a group of persons that you would say were your support system? And then Karrian, I'd love for you to answer the same question.
For me, when I fell unwell, I was in the United States in the airport, and most of my family reside in the US. However, I live in Australia. So, Stacey, I was airlifted back after 40 days and would then spend the rest of the last 2 years recovering here. So no family, no aunties, no cousins, no husband, no boyfriend, no girlfriend, nobody. I credit my recovery to a very large global group of friends who stepped in and did amazing things. And through this adversity, I had the beauty of being able to bear witness to what I call extraordinary kindness. And some of it came from strangers, which was really beautiful, who might make food and sent it to the hospital when I was prolonged inside with very bad food, to looking after my son, caring for my dog, my investors who, showed up at my bedside and supported me through that. But it was a very long and kind of lonely journey for me, very, very honestly. But I think the learnings that came from that, being able to find the inner strength, has been the silver lining. So versus having a full, group to kind of step in and put me in cotton wool and nurture me through this, there have been a wonderful group of girlfriends here in Australia that have looked after me. But I would say at a larger global scale, the encouragement that came from the people of Tech Beach, from those who had been in the tech scene with me in other cities and countries, and my clients, it was just miraculous that I felt so loved and supported, even though everyone was really far away and the pandemic didn't help, bridge those physical gaps in any stretch.
Thank you for that. Karrian?
As I mentioned, Stacey, my mother's siblings and relatives were particularly supportive. So I'm very close to my cousins and my mother's side of the family, because even though it was very trying, I found that it made the bond even stronger because I was now living under their roof, and that relationship has continued to this day because it made us closer. And two things jumped out to me as I reflected back on the situation. So I wondered, while we're going through it, why would they go through the trouble of accommodating us? Because we were a burden, we were a strain, as I said. And separate and apart from them being a loving family, I remember, and even now after her passing, them sharing instances where she went out of her way to help them. One of them explained how when she just started to work, before she had me, of course, how she helped to pay for them to go through teachers college. Or one explained she paid for them to go to Bible college. And even though she didn't have much, the times when she was working, she would always extend herself. And so, what stays to me to this day, not only through her example, but my father has this saying where he says, seek a friend before you need one. And so
that's good. Yes, I like that.
And so I try to go out of my way to help people. And not that I'm necessarily looking for the return of the favor, but you really don't know when you will need somebody. And I feel like while we are blessed with resources, we should invest in other people and help other people, because you just don't know. You know how life is.
Yes.
If it doesn't fall on you, maybe a child, or just somehow overall, I think it helps. I know some people would call it karma, some people would call it, maybe your blessings will multiply, but I'm a firm believer in that, in going out of my way to help people for that reason, remembering that I would have been helped tremendously by people who, well, they certainly didn't owe me anything, but the fact that they went above and beyond during, more than a decade of need.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for that, ladies. I do have one question as we get ready to close. I know the conversation seemed like it happened very quickly, but I do have one question so that we can ensure that our viewers have a takeaway from this really interesting and inspiring conversation. And that is, if you had any one particular thing that you may have experienced during your disrupted moments or on your way back from disruption, what is that one takeaway you would leave with our viewers on how to use challenges as levers to creating success, whether it is in their career or ultimately in creating the life they want? And I'll start with you, Gail, to just answer that question. Thank you.
So I would say that often disruption tends to leave what we would call battle wounds, be they emotional, mental, spiritual, or physical. And these wounds, once we survive them, they become scars. And we've been taught to hide our scars and be self-conscious of them. But the perspective I wish to offer everyone is slightly different. I ask persons to consider what I ended up arriving at, which helped me, was that scars are simply the universe's signature upon the scroll of your life. It authenticates you not only as a survivor, but as a warrior. It is part of your story, and should you decide to share it and charge it with the right purpose and the right energy, you can support others in their path as well. The thing about it is that disruption also should not be a taboo word. A plant needs to disrupt the soil in order to grow. A butterfly has to disrupt its sleep and break free of its cocoon in order to complete its metamorphosis. So disruption is often a traveling companion to something called transformation. And in the digital and tech space that many of us work within, I would encourage everyone to be constructively disruptive. Sometimes that is the only way that personally or professionally you can evolve and achieve your fullest potential. So through everything I would have journeyed through, I now look at challenges as an opportunity to transform and to evolve. You can stay in the pain, you can sit in it, but it's not going to serve anyone. So that would be the one thing I would like to leave and offer to the audience.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I really like the way that you talked about our scars are really the signature. It's almost like the signature on our soul of our journey. Really beautiful. Okay, Karrian, how about you? What's the one takeaway you'd want to leave with our audience?
So I would say look at how your challenges or your difficult situations can translate into something meaningful, beautiful, helpful. And one example of that is, although I have transcended the years of significant financial hardship and I'm now in a comfortable job, I keep on thinking, one, how do I ensure that I never end up back in that place? And two, how do I create a system where people don't have to feel so boxed in and have their backs against the wall? And I guess that's where I would mention the fact that earlier this year, I started a business called Workly. And, it's a job platform that allows people, regardless of whether you're qualified, unqualified, once you have a skill set that, a company or somebody can benefit from, you can sign up on the platform for absolutely free to market your services and earn an income or supplement your income. And I connected that to my life story, where I would have mentioned to you ladies that I remember one particular night when my mom was crying because she had absolutely no money. And I asked her, how come, I thought we had, a little bit of money left over. And she said she spent her last 500 Jamaican dollars paying a job agency to secure a job. And after weeks of waiting, no job was forthcoming. So I just feel like when you're in a bad situation, it's almost like the system is set up against you. And so I think I owe it to others to find a way to help fix some of those problems, instead of just, focusing on the fact that I'm out of it, so long, great for you. Like I actively feel like it's my responsibility to try and create a better life and more opportunities for those people in that kind of situation.
Totally get that. It's pay it forward. The pay it forward principle is one that I think if more of us practiced it, would be a far better world collectively. Yes. So thank you so much, Karrian. And Steph, we will round it out with your one takeaway that you want to leave with our our viewers, whether it's today or they're watching at a later date?
Well, I think when we look at adversity, and when adversity presents, whether that be emotional, physical, or spiritual, we default as humans to a critical view of the universe is conspiring against me. And we see these challenges as they're here to take us down or to delay. And a very wise Jamaican woman said to me after I woke up from this coma that I nearly lost my life in, she said, the universe doesn't conspire against you, it conspires with you. And you must see this, Steph, as the universe building a bridge. So the way in which I was showing up in what I was intending to do with our Billion Lives by 2025 mission that we stated in 2019, she said, instead of seeing the journey as a distraction and a delay, see it as a bridge being built. And we don't often know how long the bridge is going to be. We cannot see the end point of that bridge. And when we're on that bridge, the bridge could be a little bit rocky, it could be a little bit unstable. What we're busy focused on getting across the bridge, we're not looking down at what that bridge has taken us over. And in many instances, by way of that adversity, by way of that delay or that challenge being forced on a very specific and guarded path, the universe is protecting us and empowering us to transcend and transfer to exactly into that place that we are supposed to be in perfect alignment in due course. So my suggestion would be for anyone who's listening to this who might be dealing with adversity, change your lens on the situation. And rather than looking for the why and the what, look for the where. Because the where is where you'll end up when all of this has transcended and you're across that bridge, and have faith. So Stacey, that would be really the biggest lesson and takeaway for me, is being grateful for the universe building me a bridge.
Wow. Oh, you guys are just like, let me tell you, I'm over here with the tissues. I got all kinds of things going on. Absolutely, absolutely beautiful. And guys, let me tell you, we are actually at the end of our time together today. I would love to give special thanks to all our viewers, whether you tuned in live or you're watching at a later time. I want to give amazing thank you to these Wonder Women, Gail, Dr. Karrian, Stephenie. You are all amazing and so deserving of all the success that you are creating in your lives. Truly, truly inspirational. I want to thank our production partner, Kinesis Studio, our technical director who makes us look great on camera, Marcus Leafolk, and our production support team, Keisha Walters, design team, Nicholas Maloney and Gia Russo, and of course, executive producer and lady boss herself, Raquel Allen. And we wouldn't be here without our founders from Tech Beach, Kirk Anthony and Kyle. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I look forward to welcoming all of you again on another episode of the Wonder Woman in Tech series. Take care, everybody, and please be safe.
Yeah. Yeah. What? Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Load it.
Yeah.